No, no, no.
Um,
Just
sent to Bristol, Tennessee, to King College, which is on the borderline between Tennessee and Virginia. There's a Bristol, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia. And I was there a couple of months, and
Excuse me.
one morning I got up and they called me in and said, your wife had a baby. Obviously that was August 17th. And I remember it annoyed me when I found out that the call had come in the night before. But it was after something of this, so they didn't tell me until the next morning. But then I was given an emergency leave, from Bristol, Virginia to Kewanee. It took me 2 days on a train to get there. Remember on the way home thinking, what are we going to name this baby? I got home, found out he was already named. My mother named him Terrence Allen, Allen being her maiden name. That was Terry. Okay, now where do I go?
Do you know where the name Terry came from? Terrence?
No, I don't. Your mother picked it, ask her.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that it came from anything, but I'll say something else. Jump ahead here, out of the Twilight Zone. One day, must have been in the 70s. Terry died in 1946. Buried in Anderson, Indiana. And 20, 30 years later, on one of my visits back to Indiana, I went just to visit his grave. And Terrence A. Smith, it said on the gravestone. And then when I left there, I was driving back to my mother's house. As I came around a corner onto a major street, there's a big billboard about some real estate man named Terrence A. Smith. I did a double take. I had just seen Terrence A. Smith on my son's gravestone, and now here's this big, with a picture of a man.
Huh.
So what? Huh? That was interesting.
It's interesting.
So I helped win the war in Europe. Actually, I finished combat training and as a pilot in the B-17 in April of '45. And Hitler must have heard I was coming, because 2 weeks later he committed suicide. And the next thing you knew, the war was over in Europe, so I didn't ever go into combat.
Well, but you went to Greenland, or?
Yes, what was called the Air Transport Command took 25 crews, B-17 crews, and put us through some specialized training in a hurry-up situation. Training in overwater navigation, and practice dropping an airborne lifeboat. There was a lifeboat that had been designed to fit underneath the belly of a B-17, and it had 3 big parachutes. They were attached to shackles in the bomb bay, so that you could just trigger, like the bomb dropped, and down goes. And they stationed these airplanes, there were 25 of us, all around the Atlantic, because when the war was over in Europe, they had all these airplanes over there that they had to get back here. Now, single engine and twin engines had to be put on a ship, but 4-engine planes could fly back. So some took the southern route, some took the northern route. The northern route would go from Scotland to Iceland, to Greenland, to Labrador, and then down India to the US. I was stationed in Greenland. Some of my friends got the Bahamas, the Bermudas, the Azores, and I got Greenland.
How long were you there?
Went there in June
Of
and left in October. No,
Of 40,
November.
44?
No, 45.
45?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
I graduated from cadet training and became a pilot and an officer and a gentleman in September of '44. And then went through training to learn how to fly B-17, and then they put a crew together, and we practiced dropping bombs, because that's what we were going to do. Then suddenly the war's over in Europe. They weren't using B-17s much in the Pacific, so they didn't know what to do with this. That's when they took 25, at least 25 crews. I'd like to think they took the best ones. Excuse me. And made us stationed around the Atlantic to protect this large quantity of 4-engine planes going to fly back. And another thing, I knew that a cousin of mine named Farrell Grossman was a pilot. He was a short fellow. He lived in Indianapolis, and we visited each other several times as we were growing up. We were kind of friends. I remember his sister and I, named Jean, were always going to swim the English Channel together. We never made it. But there's a reason why I'm telling you this. I was stationed in Greenland, and there wasn't much to do in Greenland. You know, there was no off-base activity. There was very little on-base activity. We played a lot of bridge, and I drank a lot of whiskey.
Where was the base in Greenland?
Greenland,
But where in Greenland?
Narsarsuaq. Just sorry you asked. Bluey West 1 was the name of the base. I don't know where they got this name. Narsarsuaq was an Eskimo name.
Right.
At that time, Greenland was owned by Denmark. It maybe still is, I don't know. And it had a population of about 20,000 on the whole damned island. The island being, excuse me, 1/3 the size of the United States, the largest island in the world. We were told that there were perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 Danes, and all the rest were Eskimos. Anyway, one night after dinner, okay, let me back up. When the weather was decent, every day there would be lots of B-17s and B-24s land. The next morning they're gone on to the U.S. Those guys were out of combat. They just wanted to get home. And then if we'd have bad weather for, excuse me, a few days, no flying activity. But one night when there was a lot of traffic, a lot of officers on the base flying these planes in, I'm in the officers club, and I see Farrell, my cousin, walk across out there, and I yell at him, and because he'd been flying P-47s, which is a fighter plane. And we went back to my room, and we chatted for a while, and he just told me what his experiences had been in France, flying a P-47, and I guess I haven't seen him since.
Wow. Were you close to any cousins or aunts and uncles?
You know, we were not. We just, unlike many families that maintain close relationships with relatives, we just didn't. That's all I can say about it. We just didn't. We had civil relationships. We just didn't have much to do with one another. Think of the way, particularly Hispanic families are, how close they are, I mean, 2 or 3 generations will be together and stay together and see each other often. We just didn't do it.
So then what did you do after Greenland?
I had the opportunity to, October, we were through with the flight of the mass flight, so they were through with us. So I had enough points to get discharged. By then, the war is over in Japan also. The war is over completely. But I was invited to participate in a test program, flying B-17s. I was kind of flattered that I was invited, because not everybody was. They were going to fasten some small jet engines to the fuselage, and it was called JATO, J-A-T-O, Jet Assisted Takeoff. And the purpose was, excuse me, that these jet engines would be used to assist in takeoff, and I presume then turned off. But I declined. I just wanted to get out. All I ever wanted to do in the first place was fly. I didn't really care for the Army, and so I got out of the service. I had that option. I got out in November of '45.
Oh, now wasn't there a period where you were based in like Florida or
Oh, yeah.
Alabama? And
Oh yes.
when was
Much
that?
of my training was down there.
Oh, that was the training period.
Basic training, Miami Beach, and then when I became a cadet, I went to Montgomery, Alabama for pre-flight, which is mostly military and book, scholastic studies. And then from there, I went to Avon Park, Florida, to what's called primary flying school. That's where we learned to fly an airplane. And I learned in an open cockpit biplane. It's the only time in my life I ever wrote graffiti on the latrine wall. It was when you soloed. Right. So I did. Robert L. Smith soloed 3/4/44. And I remember that almost every March 4th, when that day comes around, that's the day I soloed, 1944. And then from there to Macon, Georgia, what was called basic or intermediate flying training, a little larger airplane, a little more complex. And from there I went to advanced at Valdosta, Southern Georgia, a twin engine, where we completed our cadet training, and on graduation we were made an officer and a gentleman and had our wings. From there I went to Sebring, Florida, to learn to fly B-17. I'll never forget the first time I walked down the flight line one evening before dark. And I got into a B-17, and I walked up and sat down, and I looked out. There was two engines. I said, I'm not ready for this. They made a mistake. Anyway, one more thing I'll tell you. The B-17 was the largest plane that the Army Air Force ever built that did not have what you could call power assist, power steering, power brakes. It didn't have anything like that. The next larger was a B-29, and it had a lot of power assist because the surfaces, the control surfaces were big, and it was a pretty big heavy airplane. And they were connected directly by cables. When you pulled on the wheel or pushed on the rudders, actuating a cable which went back there and turned some wheels and made it move. So it took some strength. Of course, then we were young and strong, and we had that strength. But the first time I ever flew a B-17, the instructor took up 5 of us, I think, and I did not happen to be sitting in the student seat on takeoff. When it was my turn, we were already up there somewhere. So the instructor said, okay, just get in the seat and then get adjusted, Is he ready? Yeah, okay. He said, okay, just hold this altitude and heading. So I get my hands on the wheel and my feet on the stutter, and then I noticed we started to drift off. We drifted off, so I pushed on the rudder, nothing happened. I never pushed a little more. I was 19. I was a little. I looked at him. He looked at me. He said, "You've got to push." So, and it moved. Never forgot that. Anyway, I had to push pretty hard on the control surfaces to make it work, but it worked. And after that, I finished there, and then I went to Tampa, Florida for a couple of weeks where they put a crew together, co-pilot, navigator, and 7 enlisted men. And then we went back to Avon Park, Florida, on the other side from primary, and we did our training as a crew to drop the bombs. We did a lot of formation flying at 20,000 feet, a lot of night flying, and then we're ready to go, and the war's over.
Okay, so that, I guess that was a little digression.
I'm sorry.
No, it was fine. But, so you were earlier. You were talking about late 1980 when you got out of the service. That was 45.
November of 45.
Right. So it was around the time Jody was born.
Say again.
Jody was born then.
Yes, by golly, just right then. Right then she was born. And of course Terry was 2.5, almost 3. Yes. Then I worked in Chicago for a short time, selling pots and pans. I would put on a dinner. I would go to this lady's house. She would invite a number of couples over. I would prepare the dinner, cook a roast, and bake a cake, and I don't know what all. And then I'd feed them, and then I'd make a presentation in an attempt to sell the pots and pans.
Wow.
It's an interesting experience. What are you laughing at?
No, it sounds funny.
You didn't know that?
Yeah, I think I heard that.
Yeah.
How long was that?
A few months. A few months. And then we moved back to Anderson, Indiana, and I got a job in the factory. and then shortly thereafter Terry got sick. He died in December of 43. Wait, 46, excuse me, December of 46. And then I decided to go back to school.
Died right before Christmas, right?
Died December 22nd, funeral was Christmas Eve. And then somewhere after that I decided to go back to school. I got catalogs from Purdue, and the curriculum seemed so narrow, so technical. I just wanted to learn other things. So I got catalogs from Indiana, and your mother was reluctant to go for there were stories of veterans' families going hungry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, I will go one semester here in Anderson, and we'll see. So I arranged my classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I worked Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday as a laborer in construction. Made enough money and decided, okay, it'll work. So in 1948, in September, Indiana University. And I remember my brother said, well, what are you going to major in? I said, I don't know. What the hell are you going to college for? I said, well, I want to learn. I got there and talking to a counselor, I learned that there was something called social work. I'd never heard of it. Having grown up in a small WASP town, so I learned that a degree in social work, you had to take courses in what they call a concentration group of 5 years. Psychology, sociology, history, political science, and economics. And I thought, those are things I want to learn about. So I got a degree in social work. And then scholastic full scholarship to University of Chicago Graduate School, and went up there, and I turned out. I was a grad school dropout. It would have taken 2 years to get a master's, and after 1 year I quit and dropped out of school, and I worked as a social worker for 2 or 3 months. Cook County, which is Chicago. Sat down one night at the budget at the table and went through and if my income had been $60 a month less, I would have qualified for the relief that I was administering, and I thought something's wrong here. So I quit that and went to work driving a cab, making I think $100 a week, big money. And we decided to go back to California. Your mother and I did. You know, we didn't have anything, didn't have anything to lose. So
and Roger had been born?
Okay. Yes, he was born when he was born at Indiana University in Bloomington. When we first got there, we lived in veterans housing, which were tiny, tiny trailers. And it was just Jody and your mother and I. And then they had larger trailers, about twice as big, for people with 2 or more children. So I lied to him and said, my wife's pregnant. So we got into a larger trailer. And we couldn't get her pregnant. Finally we did. That's where David was born.
Roger.
Huh?
Roger.
That's right, you're David. Huh? That's where Roger was born.
Right.
And then, well, California.
What year did you go to California? 50?
Well, I graduated from Indiana University in 1950, University of Chicago 50-51. So it was December of 51, and your mother went ahead and stayed with Betty and Slim, the Fosters, for a while, and it was just Christmas.
Slim was what you called John?
Say again?
Slim was what you called Betty's husband?
John was what we called Slim, when he was younger. Everybody called him Slim.
Oh, okay.
You didn't know that?
No.
I guess in later life she called him John.
Right.
She know we knew him by Slim. He was about 6'5".
Right.
Yeah, he's not very, very tall. I remember to get to California, I delivered a car. There were many automobile dealers that had the cars, maybe a year-old car or 2-year-old car that they wanted to deliver to the West because there was a market. So I went to Chicago and arranged, I picked up the car, And they didn't care exactly what route we took. I think we were given like 10 days or something. And we were given some money for gas. I don't remember. But I went down to Indianapolis, picked up my mother, drove to Long Beach, and then the next day I swear it must have been Christmas Eve, delivered the car to Las Vegas. When I picked it up, that's where they wanted it delivered, and I was hoping it would be Los Angeles, but it was Las Vegas. Drive it to Las Vegas. I got there, the dealership was closed. Remember, I slept in the car overnight. Morning, got on a bus and came back. Beginning in January, started looking for work. Went to the telephone, among others, and I took the test and, excuse me, talking to the interview, ran out.
Maybe 15 more minutes?
Okay. We,
You can,
talking to
you
the
can
interviewer.
keep talking.
Okay, talking to, I can't do it with you going, David.
Yeah.
Talking to the interviewer, do you have to go to the bathroom?
No.
To start talking?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So where were we?
I was applying to a company for a job. There had been an ad in the paper for a yellow page salesman. To the interviewer, at that time I had a college degree and 1 year of graduate school. He told me in all frankness, he said, we found that people with your education who do this work meet with all kinds of business owners and they get a better job offer and they don't stay with us. So I said, okay, and I got up ready to leave. He said, but hold on a minute. We have something else, something called plant engineering. Because I had a year of engineering at Purdue and I learned a few things, so we did whatever we had to do and I got hired in plant engineering and put into 5 months, which was pretty good. Excuse me. And I worked for them for 8.5 years. I realized my kids are going to be old enough to go to college and I wouldn't have the money to send them. I better do something. So I quit and went into business and went broke.
Went into business doing what?
I bought a franchise doing window tinting, which in 1960 was new, you know. Well, it was not too smart. It was rather dumb of me to do that, but that's the only mistake I've ever made in my life.
Now, by that point, you had already moved to Newport Beach, and Patty was born, and
Well, and beyond Newport Beach, Patty was born, and we moved to Garden Grove while I'm working for the phone company. And David was born, and then
fast. Did you want to say anything more about that period, Newport Beach, or anything?
that's where Roger and Jody learned to swim. To swim meets in Orange, California, and they won quite a bit. And the local people there were very annoyed that we had come from Newport Beach. They thought we were from a rich family in Newport Beach and had had training or something, and they had had no training except what I had given them but they were good swimmers. And then we bought a home in Garden Grove.
So, and the reason you moved to Garden Grove was just to buy a home, buy a house? That was the first time you bought a house, right?
We were in a very small 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and your mother got pregnant somehow with Patty. So we had Jody and Roger. Now here's another one. So we decided that we needed a bigger house, and I wanted to buy one in Newport Beach. If you know anything about economics, there's one available in Newport Beach, 12.500, vacant lot next to it, a part of the deal, 2-story house. Well, this is the truth. You can ask your mother, but she wanted a new house. Well, we couldn't afford a new house in Newport Beach, so I said, go driving on Sundays and find one you like. I'll go with you, and we finally ended up buying one in Garden Grove. That's how we happened to be up there rather than Newport Beach. And then I got into gardening. I found that I really enjoyed gardening, growing flowers, etc., etc. And then, I think we're running out of time, David.
You can at least 5 more minutes.
I have to go to the bathroom, put my shoes on.
Oh.
Leave in 5 minutes?
No, we can leave in 15 minutes.
Okay. Today is what? Or did you say? Today is May 2nd,
Right.
2004. 2004. And Marie are here visiting me, much to my pleasure. And yesterday we met friends of mine, Chen and Elizabeth Cho, a Chinese lady, a Korean lady. We had lunch with Tina and dinner with Elizabeth, and we had a good time.
Well, you want like maybe 5 more minutes on between these and now, the last 40 years.
I've married times, moved a lot, lived all over the country. Yeah, after your mother and I were divorced, well, then married Sarah, and Bob was born, and then married Joanne. Well, no, we got Sarah and I were divorced. And later I met Joanne, we went together a few years, married her. I remember I moved to Las Vegas for a year, and then back to Garden Grove, working in Long Beach for Britannica, and then moved to Minneapolis, and then moved to Iowa, and we lived on a farm there. Came there, we lived on a farm with Craig and Scott DeVite. And we were divorced. Then I moved to Philadelphia. Oh, changed jobs. Then I got promoted, moved to Philadelphia. Was there 6 months, and then I moved to Phoenix, and been moving ever since. Moved to Sacramento and back to Phoenix and back to, I don't know, lived in for a while. And then
Utah.
we had dogs. I got married to Diane. We finally were divorced, and then I moved to Washington to be near me for a while, and then I moved to Utah. And then in 1997 came back to Arizona. And who knows, tomorrow brings.
Yeah. Okay. So and that's where you are.
People wake up.
So
Story's over.
we'll film another chapter at a later.
Okay, maybe so. We'll have to flesh it out.
But
Intended.
okay. Thank you very much.